Okay. So look, like we kind of just discussed, guys, it would be great for me to kind of run through a little bit about the system. It would be great for you to see kind of the overview and the high level stuff. So we won't go into too much detail here. I'll send back the requirements document with our responses and additional evidence and things like that. But hopefully this would help join the dots and put some context to the response that we'll send over to you guys as well. So yeah, just as a quick brief intro. So I'm Ash. I'm one of the co-founders at Volunteero. We started Volunteero in 2020, so we're relative newcomers to the scene, to this particular space. And the reason I started the business was actually because I am a volunteer myself, and I have been for numerous kind of organizations like Crisis, Age UK, things like that in the past. And I had always kind of felt that the process of volunteering was more disjointed than I think it needed to be. And in short, my application took too long to process. I didn't really know where I was in the stage. The onboarding was a little bit arduous, and I also just found that once I was up and running, I never had one place to go to communicate with people, to pick up tasks, events, things like that, to log my feedback, log expenses. And that lack of centralized place for me as a volunteer meant, one, that I was going to do less than I really could have done for my organization, but also, quite frankly, by the end of it, I was a bit exasperated and ended up kind of leaving my charity as a result. So that is what sparked the idea behind Volunteero. And it was really obviously in aiming to solve my own problems, but as a result, we realized there was a lot of challenges that volunteer managers were facing in the background that we needed to be able to solve through a platform that we were going to build as well. So in short, we deal with organizations ranging in size from the top national charities like Citizens Advice and hopefully soon to be sort of Salvation Army, Re-engage, and others, down to local organizations as well, and everything else in between. And the final thing to mention about Volunteero is, I think, a couple of things that make us unique before we dive into it. One, we are volunteer management and recruitment. Okay. So our big belief is that there needs to be a one-stop shop place for anyone who wants to go and volunteer. Now, obviously, there's things like Do It, Reach, and things like that, but they're disjointed again because it's just advertising and then there's no management. So by connecting management platform with a recruitment tool that we've got as well, that's going to provide the better experience. And we are now #1 on the App Store and Play Store, and we're helping drive net new applicants to all of our organizations. Some have seen a doubling in the amount of applicants that they're receiving since we rolled that out last year. Second thing I think to mention is that we're mobile first and razor focused on the volunteer experience. Okay. Most volunteers, they spend up to 5 hours on their phone every day. It's a sad fact, but it's the way that life is, right? And so we didn't go, right, let's build web-based portal and then maybe try and make it work for mobile. We started with an app for the volunteers and then built the web-based version of our app for the volunteers as well afterwards. And it just means that the level of engagement is just vastly higher than it can be on a web-based portal, as well as the general experience. And then I think the final thing to note is just around the team. So if you were, if you guys go through this process, naturally, I would imagine you'd speak to some of our clients, and you'd want to. I think one of the things that will stand out is just our speed of development and focus on kind of our customers' needs. So we are releasing probably a new feature every month, as well as iterative improvements that our customers are telling us that they'd like to see. So unlike others that have maybe been around for 10, 15 years, but have been stood still for some time, we are completely different in that regard. Okay. So that's enough of my sales spiel, shall we say. So I'm going to dive in. I'm going to show you the platform. But Rebecca, Emily, please feel free to just jump in and ask me questions as we go through. And it looks like perfect timing. Elle has just arrived. So I'll maybe just very briefly, once she's on, recap what I just mentioned there.
While you're doing that, I'm just going to switch back to my laptop.
So, okay, no worries at all. Elizabeth, hi.
Hi, Ashley. I'm really sorry. I've been in back-to-back meetings and they keep overrunning, so I do apologize.
No worries at all. Honestly, all good, all good. Thank you so much for taking the time. Emily's just switching over back to the laptop, which is probably a good idea if I'm going to be showing some of the platform. But Elizabeth, just briefly, thank you so much for sending the requirements. We will provide our kind of formal response to kind of all of those requirements, as well as evidencing them and some other resources that you might find helpful. Really glad that we got this time, because hopefully we can just, I was speaking to Rebecca and Emily, we can run through the platform so that when you get that requirements doc through from us, you can kind of connect the dots a little bit better than just a spreadsheet, shall we say. And Elizabeth, I just summarized just a brief intro on Volunteero, so I'll do the abridged version. We started in 2020. I'm a volunteer myself, have been for years, and essentially I wanted to solve the problems I faced as a volunteer, give myself one place to go to interact with my organization, to manage onboarding, pick up tasks, communicate with them, all in one easy to use app primarily, and that is where we started. We've got clients that range from top UK charities that include like the likes of Citizens Advice and very soon Salvation Army, Re-engage, and many others, but also local organizations as well, and everything in between. Three things before I dive in and show you the platform, and that I think really make us unique. Okay. And the first is that we are volunteer management and recruitment. Okay. There are platforms where you can advertise, like Do It, Reach, and even things like Indeed. The problem there is that once the application is in, that is it from a volunteer's perspective. Then it goes into whatever volunteer management practices and processes that happen behind the scenes for that organization. We believe by connecting management and recruitment together, it's a seamless experience for volunteers where it's one place they start and they never leave. Okay. And that's a really, really, joined up seamless experience. So we offer, our clients can post their opportunities onto our public recruitment app, which is #1 on the App Store, Play Store, and across kind of key Google search terms. So in short, our aim is to build like the Deliveroo or Uber, should we say, for volunteering. So we can do a lot of that volunteer acquisition so that it's not always a key focus for you guys, and we can just help there. #2 is that we are razor focused on the volunteer experience, because if volunteers actually use a management platform, then it's going to take so much of the burden away from the administrators and your staff team. Okay. The problem about if a portal is web-based or it's not very easy to use and they don't use it, then suddenly it's really just a database where all actions have to be taken by the administrators, and those hours really rack up. And then the final point around why we are unique is that if you were to go through the process, obviously, and speak to some of our clients later on in the stages, which obviously we'd really, really encourage that. I think what you'll hear from them and what shines through about us is that our kind of support and just general customer focus is second to none. And our development speed is extremely fast and of very high quality. And what we do is, you'll see later, we crowdsource ideas from volunteer managers across all of our clients for the best possible new things to build into the platform. And we're usually rolling out a feature per month as well as improvements bi-weekly. Okay. So that is my sort of sales spiel, so to speak. And I'm going to dive in and actually show you around the platform, do my best to kind of keep it as relevant to you guys as possible. I will probably go light on the things that are pretty standard across volunteer management platforms, and maybe hone in a bit more around things that are potentially exciting and unique. But just ask any questions, jump in if I've gone past something too quick, or you'd like me to kind of spend a bit more time on particular sections. Okay.
That's great. Thanks.
No
Yep,
problem.
sounds good. Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much. And I'm going to now start by sharing my screen. So if you just bear with me 1 second. Okie dokie. Right. Where are we? Let's just see. Can you see a Volunteero logo on the top left of the screen I'm sharing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Super stuff. Okay. Right. So where do we start? Well, we've got two sides to the platform. We have a management interface, and then we have the volunteer app. The Volunteer app, it's Android, a native Android app, native Apple app, and also a web-based one for those without smartphone capabilities. Okay. We're going to start in the management portal today. Okay. So the first thing that is important is that you are able to publicize the opportunities you're recruiting for onto your website, so onto your volunteering page or something like that. And you want it to be dynamic and controlled by yourselves so that you're not at the behest of a website team who have got loads of other things on their plate to make changes. You can't be as quick and as nimble as you'd like. So you can build your interactive recruitment page onto your website. So this would be embedded somewhere on your website. It's done once, and then it's all real time updated by yourselves from the platform. And it would look something like this. This is pretty standard stuff. You know, it's not totally revolutionary by any means, but things I would point out is we have a lot more dynamism around the searching and filtering capabilities. Okay. And what this means is you can be a bit more unique about some of those opportunities you're hiring for. Even if it's just looking for a videographer or something to come and help at an event, you can get it posted in seconds. You can have specific skills where they can search and filter based on skills that they care about. And they can filter based on location and whether it's on-site, hybrid, or whatever else. Now, what makes up an opportunity? It's built in the platform, and we'll talk about in just a moment. But they can then also hit apply now, and it's going to take them through to an application form, which is again built in Volunteero. Okay, so now let's take a step back and say, okay, well, how do you build these bits and pieces? So your opportunities page, firstly, you set up the page so that the branding and the color schemes and logos and things meet your brand scheme. And then you can start building opportunities. And you do so either by duplicating existing ones to save you time or creating them from scratch. So let's take a quick look at an example, perhaps a community ambassador. You're adding images and media to make it look and feel how you like. Requirements, description, benefits, and also then the specific locations that are potentially relevant. If you've got different places that this opportunity is going to be hosted at, then you can do so by adding it. That's also important for our marketplace because when your opportunities are being found, typically they're being found on a location basis and on a cause basis. So if you think about people who are searching our app for opportunities, they're searching probably based on what kind of causes they care about, maybe skills, and also location. So you've got everything in here to also appear nicely to the relevant volunteers on our marketplace.
Okay.
You then choose which application form to send them through. So you've got a series of forms built in Volunteero. They might be expressions of interest, specific application forms for specific roles, completely up to you, and you can change them at any time. So we're going to choose to just send them through a standard application form that we have built. And the final piece of the puzzle here is we need to post it. So we're publishing it. To our search board basically means to send it to that web page that I showed you onto your website. But also you're going to want to post it to our app-based recruitment module, which is essentially going to get this opportunity in front of people who are just searching for volunteering opportunities. Okay, so more additional eyeballs for your opportunities. And there we go. It's up and running. Now, yes, go for a question.
Just a question on that. Yeah. So there might be up and Rebecca, like feel free to jump in here, but there might be opportunities where we might not want to advertise or have that advertise on any kind of marketplace because it would be like some kind of quite a special like volunteer application of some sort. Bex, if you want to add anything to that, but
yeah. So some of our volunteer roles are like high value, like appeal board chairs, that kind of thing. So we wouldn't necessarily advertise those. We'd normally approach somebody.
Gotcha.
But we'd still maybe want them to fill in something bespoke so we can gather their information. It might be that we manually just add them into the system, but is there something where you could customize an information form or have different types of application forms where you could call one I don't know, appeal board chair information form, and it doesn't go public, we can just send like a link to the person or something like that.
Perfect. Rebecca, you basically essentially explained it perfectly in exactly how Volunteero works. So some of your stuff will be on opportunities linked to application forms that are on your website. Others, you will potentially just have a form that's not able to be found by anybody unless you send them the direct URL, custom URL to that form. So if we were saying this was the form for our trustees or something else like that, or those high value items that you kind of mentioned, this form maybe isn't linked to any opportunity and it's not able to be found, but I can simply share it by giving that link to that individual you mentioned. Okay, so yeah, exactly as you said, you can do any of those approaches you've mentioned there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And just to say again, my internet is really rubbish. If you ask me something and I'm just mute, it's probably because it's a bit delayed. So I do apologise.
No worries at all.
I'm not being rude.
All good, all good. So building a form, this one I probably won't spend vast amounts of time on because you've probably all built a form on Microsoft or Google or something, and it's largely the same. Where we differ is one, because we're a specific a volunteer management system, you have got standard profile fields, which are going to be able to just be drag and drop because they link to an actual profile in the future. Okay. Now, we've got all of the custom fields and questions you'd hopefully need for your document uploads, you're agreeing to terms, conditions, things like that. But also something that might be of value to you is we have an automatic reference collection feature. So one of the things that our customers were telling us is we're spending 45 minutes to an hour per applicant chasing up for these references and things like that. It's a real challenge for them. So we do have a feature that collects it on your behalf, and it sends out an email to the person that the applicant's provided or persons. It sends out with another form which you've created in Volunteero, and it brings it back as a reference once they've submitted those details, and you can simply approve or reject it. So it's a big time saver in that onboarding process as well, which might be valuable to you. Another thing that's helpful with our forms is that you can enable application tracking. So when a volunteer submits an application on your website or something like that, or via that link that you've emailed out to them, once they submit it, they get prompted to say, would you like updates on your application? And they can click yes. And then you'll see a bit later, you can provide them updates via the platform, very easy, couple of clicks and you're away. So it's just a way to make sure that that conversion rate from applicant to volunteer is higher than it would be elsewhere. Okay. One of the things obviously to mention, it is part of the requirements, but it's pretty standard for us, but we will obviously tick this off, is that you can have the relevant team members notified for their forms. Okay, so to Rebecca's earlier point, only some of the team might be focused on managing the application of those high value ones, but the standard volunteers, applicants are managed by somebody else. So that's fine. You can customize who gets notified for which type of applicants. Okay. And here is how you manage the submissions. So you have a submission section, and each individual in your team is likely to have a different view set up and saved for themselves. Because again, Rebecca might be looking, or Rebecca or someone from Rebecca's team might be looking at the application form for trustees or high value, and others just looking at the standard ones. And you can customize and set your default views so that you see this, just what you need to see in the future. Now, in this section here, it's a nice, easy visual way of seeing where your applicants are in a process. And if you open them up, you can firstly see all of the details of their application on the left-hand side there. And then down on the right-hand side, there's a few sections worth pointing out. The application status section, this is that tracking piece that I mentioned just a second ago. You change these. It just keeps it nice and simple here. Just a couple of different statuses, a comment section, and a date to maybe give them some estimated completion date or onboarding time date. And it means that if you do make updates here, you can see if the applicant has subscribed to notifications, because obviously GDPR, we have to give them the option to do so or not. And most of them do. I think about 98% subscribe to these notifications. So you can then just update the status status and trust that that volunteer now has a little bit of a glimpse into what's going on behind the scenes. This process, on the other hand, could be more comprehensive, because this could be a 6-stage journey that they have to go through, or your team has to take them through before they're ready to actually, begin their volunteering. And it's completely customizable, and it's also customizable per application form. So again, just jumping back to that example we used where it's a high value, they might have to go through lots of different stages, whereas a fundraising volunteer just has 3 quick stages, and you can make sure that that journey is customized for each. Okay. And finally, if references are part of what you're doing, you'll see that in their own section here. You can see details of when they were requested, to who they were requested by, and also if they have been received. You'll see the actual details and content of their reference in this section here, with a button to allow you to approve it. Okay. We do obviously have the ability for you to put them in manually if for whatever reason you have to just do them over the phone, or some other thing sort of takes over in that instance. So you've got all of the capabilities you need here. So take a quick brief pause. What we've talked about is opportunities, sending out applications, receiving submissions, and kind of managing them in the platform. Any questions at this stage?
Okay. The stage now.
Cool, fantastic.
Sorry, quick one from me.
Yes.
This process part on the right hand side. So
Yeah.
can you set that per like volunteering role? So when you set up the role initially, that process can be set up based on the role, right? Rather than kind of the individual person.
That's exactly right. So it picks up automatically. I'll quickly just show you so it makes sense. When I go into our say we've got a generic volunteer application form, what we do is I choose the process that's going to pick up automatically.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you just set that up prior, right? To that role, or that kind of process is set up prior to putting together the form.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's set up prior. Yeah.
Okay.
So here's our list of processes. You might have a fundraising one and things like that. Cool.
Great.
So when your volunteer is actually ready to be, shall we say, quote unquote, onboarded, it's this button at the top right here. Okay. And all of the profile information for that volunteer from their form is pre-filled. So we're not copying and pasting to create a new profile or anything like that. It's already there for you. But it's at this point where I just briefly mentioned, we won't go into this into too much detail for this overview call, but the best way to onboard volunteers in Volunteero is to get them onto the app ASAP. Okay. The reason being is you can then task them with onboarding very, very custom journeys and their own kind of empowerment to own their own onboarding in the app. And the way that works is that we have a feature called groups. So think of groups as a way to essentially ring fence the volunteers and customize what they see in the app. I'll give you 2 examples. You've got a volunteer who just does reception stuff, and they're not qualified, or they don't want to see other types of activities. Fine, they go into the reception group. But then maybe you've got another volunteer who was onboarded initially, they do reception work, but they also want to see your fundraising events. So they would be in 2 different groups, okay? And what it means is that when you post a rota, an event, an activity, a task onto the app, you post it into a specific group so that only certain groups of volunteers can see that, okay? And the reason I'm mentioning it around onboarding is it's great to have specific onboarding groups for different roles and things, because it means that when they get onto the app, they'll see a list of tasks that are relevant for them to complete based on their onboarding. An interview, book an interview, fill out this form, sign an NDA. These are the types of things that you can just do very, very seamlessly in Volunteero. Now, for the sake of this demo and keeping it kind of relatively streamlined, let's just say the volunteer is actually ready to become, a community. They want to be all of these things: reception, yes, keen, event support, and community ambassadors. They're going to go into all of these groups. And it's at this point where you can create them an app account, and they're going to receive an automated welcome email with download links, sign in details, and kind of support articles to help them get onto the app seamlessly without any kind of need for intervention and stuff on behalf of Gosh. Okay. It's at this point that they move from submissions into here, volunteers, because they've been onboarded now to some degree. So what you're looking at here is essentially our volunteer database. Okay. So we talked at the start a little bit about bringing kind of all the volunteer data into one place, and that's exactly what Volunteero, as a very basic side of things, that's what we do. Okay. Now, our volunteer database is super flexible and customizable. So depending on what your role is, you might want to see different data at a glance in this table and filter and play around with it accordingly. Okay. For example, just the reason, because it's very relevant, we only released this today. Our clients were saying they would love to see who's got a birthday this week so that they can, volunteer coordinators can drop them a message on our chat feature or give them a call or send them something. Great. Okay. So that's one of the fields I would like to have a look at and filter to see who my upcoming birthdays are. But we've got it for every type of data point that you can imagine. And if I now just go into a volunteer profile for a second to look at it in a little bit more detail, what do we know about them? Well, we've got a picture because they uploaded that through the app and we know who, face to a name. We have our groups that we just talked about a second ago, and then we also have tags. So groups restrict what they can see and do on the app. Tags are simply an internal tag that you can use as many different types, set up as many types of tags as you like. It might be relating to their skills, their languages, their, health requirements, things like that. Okay. We track automatically things like length in service, total volunteering time, and all that good stuff, which is great. So you don't have to worry about that. It's always being tracked for you. We have a qualification section where you can track and monitor and add qualifications that they have received, training modules that they've completed. And you can also set an expiry date, because within Volunteero, you can find volunteers that have a qualification, that have a certain qualification coming up for expiry in the near future. Any of that, it's very possible, and it's hopefully going to streamline processes. Okay. And just back into the profile, all of the application forms, their references, other agreements and things that they may have signed, all are going to be stored here on their profile, linked to them forevermore. So again, you haven't got tons of different SharePoint drives where you're having to add files and all of that pain. It's all going to be linked in there for you. Okay. The other thing we have is badges. I don't know if I'll talk about badges just yet. Maybe let's talk about how they do activities and then we'll come back to badges. But it's a really cool feature, and we've just released an update today, which I'm really excited, and I'll show you a bit more about in a second. Going to move on in a second to talk about, soon we'll be on to the volunteer app so you can see how the volunteers engage. But firstly, we're going to have to get them some stuff to do. Maybe post a couple of events, post a rota for our reception work, things like that. But before I move on, any questions again up to this stage? Cool. All righty.
Yeah.
Super. So when you need your volunteers to do anything, we create something that gets published onto the app. Okay. And it gets published onto the app either to all of our volunteers, to a couple of different groups, to a regional group, to a role-based group. Very, very flexible, couple of clicks to make it happen. So these are what we call essentially missions. Okay. So they could be anything from share our latest post on Instagram, very simple tasks, which we now see a lot of our clients doing because it's so much easier to do through Volunteero, right up to your more traditional stuff. Come and support our runners at the marathon, be a reception worker, pick your shift, that type of thing. Okay. And so I've created a couple of examples. Won't go, again, in the interest of time, won't go into too much detail here, but in short, you create the initial structure of the type of task. So let's talk about reception. You're then going to choose the features that it's going to need. Okay. So reception workers, they're going to have to come somewhere. It's not virtual. We need them on site, and they need to know where that is. Maybe with our reception team, we're happy to pay for their tube or their train ticket or something like that. So we'll give them the ability to submit an expense claim after they've attended. do they have a rota for this type of task? So, for example, your folks that come to a fundraising event, it's probably just one day. They all just come to for the same sort of 3 hours. But for some of your tasks, there's shifts, there's a rota, there's things like that. And this just enables you to build that within a mission itself. And it's all about Volunteero. We want to boost engagement. So we really want all of your volunteers to do as much for you as they possibly could. Sometimes they just forget, right? We know what it's like. Life takes over. Well, guess what? Rather than you having to chase them, we've got a way that Volunteero can just give them a friendly nudge when they need to. So if, for example, this helps so that if a volunteer has been inactive on a particular task, so they haven't maybe booked a shift in the last 2 weeks or something, it'll just give them a friendly nudge just to say, hi, we're still here, basically. Okay, so it's a really easy, low effort way for you guys to boost a bit of that engagement. And then the final thing about building a mission structure is that you choose a report template for them to submit back. Okay, so it's all being able to have a great volunteering program. It actually relies a lot on data. Okay, who are our volunteers? What are they doing? How are they finding it? Okay, so volunteers use our app to submit quick, snappy reports. They take probably less than 15 seconds each time to submit, depending on how comprehensive the reports are. But as you can imagine, the questions they need and data they provide to you is different for the different types of tasks. So let's have a look at what those reports look like. So let's say we have a shift report for anybody doing reception work or something like that. You can build out these reports. So you're collecting the exact data that you want from volunteers. And it might be things like how much volunteering time. That's a pretty standard data point that you're going to want in the system for everything, so that you have a big number of volunteering hours at the end of the year. Maybe you want to know how they're finding their shift, because you can start to gather why people are enjoying things, why they're not, and maybe make some slight incremental improvements. Okay. A good example of this you might find is one of our hospices found out that volunteers were more happy when they left a pack of biscuits out on arrival than then they weren't. And it was a tiny change that they had to make that made volunteers happier, right? And without Volunteero, they'd have never been able to know that. Okay. You can also get them to upload pictures. So if it's a fundraising event or something like that, if they took some selfies, your content team are going to love you now, because you've got loads of content coming in from your volunteers where they've agreed to that you can go and use it. Some text data, maybe for them to let you know how they found it, ideas to make it better. But also, finally, safeguarding. Really, really important. Is a volunteer struggling? Did they find an issue? Have they got a problem? They want to basically raise their hand, but digitally. You can set these up, and they can be set up so that you can be alerted. So the relevant volunteer coordinator or teams get alerted when somebody, flags an issue in their role. Okay. And then we've got our mission template, our report templates, the structure set up, and then you've got a simple, short, snappy setup, couple of stages where we might say, let's create a event for our marathon supporters. Let's say that we would love to have about 100 or 100 or so people there. You can add your descriptions and things like that. And very soon you'll be able to add more images and other kind of documentation stuff to really enrich this task. Is there a location? Maybe it's not actually your office. This time we want to get them to come to Tower Bridge or something. So let's override that. Who should this go out to? So this is where you're going to use your groups. But actually, because this is such a catch-all cool event that you'd love everybody to see, I'm not going to put it into a group. I'm just going to send it out to all volunteers now. And then you've got a time frame and stuff to put in place. And finally, would you like to have approval? So I think, again, it was a really good example that Rebecca kindly raised. Some tasks as well you might want to retain approval. Is that volunteer actually going to be good at that? Are they reliable? Well, it's completely up to you. You can set that approval system in place as well. Okay. A lot to kind of digest there. And again, I promise we will be now looking at the app very, very shortly. I'm just going to show you our chat feature before you go off and do that. Any questions on that creation of missions, please?
No.
Super. All righty. Okay. So communication. Email. We're not saying we're ever going to replace email. Email is vital, and our system still uses a lot of automated emails and stuff in the way that it works. But our clients were telling us, one, that they were using WhatsApp sometimes, and it was really hard to manage. Also, by the way, it's a bit of a GDPR breach, a loose breach, shall we say, but it is nonetheless. But what they were telling us, what they get from WhatsApp is, one, most of their volunteers don't check their emails, or they lose the track of their emails or something. So they wanted a more engaging, immediate approach to communication in one place. The other thing they were telling us is our volunteers want to feel part of a community online. Okay. So, but we don't want to add them to a Facebook group or something like that, because we don't have full control and we don't trust Mark Zuckerberg or something like that. Okay, fine. Well, we've got a chat feature. It's built into the platform. You're the data controllers. You control every aspect of this, but it means that you can do all of those things that I just mentioned there. So you can create group chats in seconds. You can then choose, say, we're going to say it's our fundraisers. You can say, is this open to all volunteers? No, it's just a specific group of volunteers that I want to pop onto this one. And maybe it's a specific group that we want to put in. So let's call it event volunteers. You can then choose the role that the chat role that your volunteers get added to. So can they respond or not? You know, if it's a news feed, for example, you just want to send information. You don't want Joe Blogs messaging back and kind of, you know, taking up space on that news feed. So you can create that as you need to. And the great part about these is it's linked into our groups feature. So if you think, if a volunteer leaves and you were using WhatsApp, you have to remember to go back to WhatsApp, take them out or something like that, right? Well, in Volunteero, you're changing the groups as a big part of your process anyway. It will automatically update what volunteers can see and do in the app, okay? So it's all kind of catered to. You can upload a quick picture as well. Just maybe let's put a nice picture of our volunteers as our group picture chat. Great, okay. So I am about to jump over and show you the app. So what I have to do now is just stop sharing that, and I'm going to share my entire screen now.
Rebecca was just, sorry, Ashley. Rebecca was just saying that her internet isn't liking Zoom. It keeps freezing and chucking her out. So she said she apologized, but she'll watch the video, the demo back.
No worries. Thanks for letting me know, Emily. I appreciate that. So now we're going to put on our volunteer hat for hopefully the last sort of 12 minutes or so. Actually, there's a bit we'll go back into the platform to show you, but bear with me. So here we are in our app. So the one thing I want to really highlight is it isn't a labyrinth. Other platforms are, okay? If we get a volunteer lost at any point in the platform, we've lost them for good, okay? We need it to be very, very simple and easy to use. And by the way, our proof is in the pudding. I think our oldest volunteer at the moment, could be wrong, is about 89 years old on the app, right? And so we've got, I think it's about 50% of our volunteers are over the age of 60 as well. So I think, you know, that's immediately addressing the point that people who typically might not be as au fait with technology are absolutely comfortable using Volunteero. So let's start with the profile. They can do the basics you'd always expect, which is manage and own their own data and profile. They can also manage their own notification preferences. And I think the one worth flagging here is this one that I'm just turning on and off, which is, this is a big engagement booster, okay? My mum, interestingly, is one of the volunteers for one of our clients in the Midlands, and she says this has been driving her to do more volunteering, and we see it in the data as well, okay? Because volunteers can get a quick snapshot of the latest things that are there, either on a daily or a weekly basis, and this drives them back to the app. But chat and other things are also going to be what drives them back to the app. We've got lots of other things. I won't go into too much detail on it, but we've got accessibility features. We've got security features where they can enable Face ID or biometrics or something if you've got sensitive info in there. Everything, it's all catered to. Now we look into our mission section. So depending on the volunteer and which groups you guys have put me into is going to dictate what I can see and do in the platform here. Okay, what type of missions are available to me? So I can search and filter this down for the different types of tasks and things like that. So maybe I want to filter specifically for, you know, whatever it might be, events or something. that list is really long because I've been doing demos in here. So don't worry, it's not going to have, it's only going to have the stuff that's relevant for your volunteers there. An example, fundraising event. I can see all of the pertinent information that I need in terms of dates, details, resources, and also distance away from me. So these are most important information for me at this stage. I can also see how many volunteers are coming versus how many are expected. And I can accept a particular task. And now that's going to move into my ongoing section of my app where I'm going to manage it from there because I've accepted it. But in a couple of days' time, I'm going to be due there. So rather than having to scour my emails for the details that were provided, I go back into the app and I go, great, here we go. Let's get directions. Cool. Really easy. You'll get a lot more volunteers turning up to the right place and not giving you phone calls and stuff like that. Okay. Now, what happens at this point? Well, maybe I want to engage in the chat. So maybe I go to my event volunteers and my all volunteers chat, and I can engage with all of my other co-volunteers. I can react to their messages. I can reply, things like that, typically as you'd be able to expect from a chat feature. And once I've done my task, now I need to just let you know what I've done. So it's time to log that quick report. And as you can see, incredibly easy for me to just say, I spent 2 hours. How did I find it? Okay, excellent. Do with more, better. Or something like that. They might just give you a little snapshot on how they felt, what could be changed. And here is where, if I was at this event and I got some selfies with my fellow volunteers, I would upload them here. I can flag my issues using this particular toggle and include in the comments what I've want to raise. So let's toggle it on. And also let me quickly show you how easy it is for a volunteer to submit and claim an expense. Remember, the expense piece is toggle on, toggle off for you guys. So you don't have to enable this for your volunteers and they'll never know that they can upload expenses. But if they do want to, we've taken the approach of making it as easy as possible for them to do so. Okay. And rest assured, volunteer expenses, as you probably know, it's a bit of a hard topic sometimes. So making it easy for your volunteers is only going to go a long way to making them feel more valued. So very easy. Cost, justification, evidence, upload, submit. And there we go. Now, briefly, some of those types of events are going to be slightly different. There might be a shift of some kind, and I haven't actually built the shift, but I'll show you in a second how I do that. So let me actually just really briefly, I'll keep you on the line. I'll just hopefully show you how quick it is for me to build shifts because I'm going to have to do them at double time now. Yeah. Okay. Boom. Okay. Okay. Configure account. Right. Okay. It's going to be loading now in just a second. So I've just created a series of shifts here. And if I just refresh, there they are. Hopefully you can see those. I've got a series of shifts here. I can see who is all, how many others are on the shift. If I choose to join like this, as you can see, I can also add it to my own calendar. So let's be honest, they're going to be using Google Outlook or something like that really to manage their day-to-day life. So we want to make sure it's there as well as a reminder. And it's as simple as that. Now, very briefly, what I'm going to do is send myself a badge and hopefully you can see how easy this is. So let's create top volunteer, 10 hours, create badge, and here we go. Let's go to volunteers.
Is this browser stack by any chance, Ashley? What are you
Sorry?
using? What tool are you using for this for the iOS screen share?
I actually just plug it in, and what I do is I use QuickTime as a movie recording, and that's how I do it. It's really annoying because it's quite hard to do, actually. I couldn't find a good solution for it for a long time. Okay, cool. So I'm just about to deliver a badge. There we go. So what I'm going to do, there we go. As you can see at the top there, I've received a new badge from Great Ormond Street. Open it up, and there we go. There's my badge. I can see all of the existing badges I have. I can also, as you can see, I'm a top volunteer there. I can see unlockable badges as well. So that's kind of creating the carrot to hopefully boost some of those engagement as well. So I know we've got just a few minutes left. So there's a couple of things I just wanted to briefly show you back on the management side. So badges, by the way, guys, was a feature that we released in December last year, but it was manual. You had to monitor for when your volunteers hit that milestone or hit the length in service or something that you wanted to then deliver it for, and then send it to them manually. Obviously, at a larger scale organization, that's going to be quite time consuming. So we want you to be able to build automation. So you can create a badge from your own unique icons. So let's go example of, let's call it top fundraiser. And maybe we're going to say 10 hours fundraising. And what we then do is set this automation rule. This was what was released just this morning. We can then choose that we're looking for only time logged on, or only something logged on a fundraising event. Maybe only during a year. So you want them to hit this milestone during a year, or it's indefinite. We choose the data point, which is our volunteering time question. And we're going to say it's going to go above 10 hours. It's going to automatically be done. But the great thing about those custom reports working with badges is if you ask your volunteers, how much did you raise today? And they do all the bucket collections across the year, and they just also log how much they raised in the custom reports, you can give them a badge based on certain earnings or donations made. You know, it's really is the world is your oyster with that one. And then with your missions, you're tracking, you're able to see them on a Monday morning, who's coming along, which volunteers, as you can see here. I can, if I'm, managing reception, I can see my shifts. I can see where I've got gaps. I can see who's due to come along for reception. All of my reports are being logged in one place. All of that data can be extracted from our public API or via an export to Excel. So you can then play around with that data to your heart's content. If issues are flagged, it will flag it in the system. It will notify the relevant volunteer coordinator as well that an issue's been flagged. And this can be dealt with using kind of our task management system here, which is if you open it up, you can loop in team members and talk about what you're actually doing to resolve it. So you've got an audit trail and a workflow tool in one. And in your insight section, this is like high level data, basically. Most of the key data you might want will come out of exporting or the API from those reports. But if you're just being asked how much volunteering time did we have last year for specifically our community ambassadors, a couple of clicks is right there for you. Okay. Same with volunteer insights around app engagement, diversity levels, things like that. It's all kind of right there at your fingertips. And so the final thing, that's a brief summary of the platform. There's lots of things that we probably haven't been able to cover, but I promise I'll make sure I do so in the requirements for you, El. But I mentioned support at the start, and so I just wanted to finish on support because I really do know how important it is. I have had horrific experiences with technology in my previous corporate career. I am sure you guys have had the same. Okay. Now, we adamantly wanted to never become that. So one, it's always somebody you're going to get access to. It is not a robot. It is none of that stuff. It is not phone calls and things like that. One, you're given a customer success manager who is super well versed in the platform, but will spend time with you understanding your organization so that implementation is incredibly seamless. It can be done far quicker than anyone else because we don't need developer input. You can customize everything yourselves. And then you've got every article under the sun, tutorials to help, self-serve help resources whenever you need them. Message our team. And I also mentioned that we crowdsource ideas. So your team can go, brilliant, what is it? And I mentioned, I don't know if we haven't closed it off yet, but I mentioned that I showed you birthdays. People were asking, we want to know about birthdays, and we knew it because they've all submitted it here, and 29 of our staff users across clients have voted for it. So that's why we decided, cool, we'll go and build it. And it's the reason I think this platform will just continue to evolve, and it will just be head and shoulders above the rest if it isn't already, hopefully. But anyway, that's it from me, guys. I know that was a hell of a lot of information just to throw at you in the space of an hour, but I've got time if you do have any questions you want to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that this is all great. I'm interested in, like, in terms of the kind of financial aspect of it as well. I think all in all, we're probably looking at around 600 volunteers. And we're probably looking about 20 managed, like, volunteer managers, with various you know, accesses to the tool, to the platform.
Yeah.
So we'll have managers who will oversee the volunteer managers. And you know, so we'll have like super admin users and just kind of regular administrative users. So I'm assuming that Volunteero is able to help us manage that as well. But I mean, in saying that, I guess our budget for this is, I think it's around 4 grand for this. And so I guess, yeah, it'd be good to know how much it would cost as well, so that we can yeah, we can take it forward, but as well as the requirements. So I guess it would be good to know, yeah. And also, does the app, iOS and Android, is that covered in the overall cost, or is that separate?
Yeah.
And also, is there like custom branding that we can apply, like our Gosh branding to as well? It would be good to know if we had to pay extra for that as well.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So the way that we approach things out is that again, I always found that sometimes with tech, the pricing's a labyrinth. You sign up and then immediately you hit some wall internally that says you don't have this feature or something, right? It's just a nightmare. So we don't do that. Everything that you see today is yours, and there are kind of no limits to it, essentially. The only things that you are essentially paying for are the things you mentioned for me there, which is the license for the number of volunteers and the number of administrators. Okay, so 620 approximately. We have elements of branding that are in there that I can I'll talk about in the requirements and stuff. And we're continually improving on more elements of branding that you can put into that. But again, nope, because it's all completely controlled by you and it's so easy to do. It would be unethical for us to charge, to be honest. All of those apps, everything is basically included. Look, I think back of the envelope type of numbers, I think, you know, that is probably lower than what it would typically cost. You know, if I were to kind of put, because we'd love to work with you, you know, I was thinking, okay, we'll put what is our kind of typical enterprise level discount on, which is 50% off of our kind of list price. And that comes in around the sort of 10K mark. Now, I understand that, you know, you've got a budget here. I can certainly go away, and for certain approvals and stuff, I go to the board, and I've had them signed off in the past, you know, and I put my pitch towards it, which is, you're a wonderful organization and everybody knows the brand, right? Which is amazing for us too. So I can certainly do that, but to try and go for something like 4K might be probably a bit of a stretch, if I'm totally honest. Do you know if there's any, you know, if you were absolutely in love, and I know this is too early to say about this, but, you know, say there was a head and shoulders, you know, solution standout that, you know, was going to give far greater time saving and things. Do you think there's any chance that there's wiggle room on that budget?
Potentially, yeah. But I mean, I guess it would be good to know from your side what we could, like, how close we can get to
Okay.
the budget. So yeah, we'll leave that with you.
Yeah, leave that with me. I'll get an answer to that before
Yeah.
the end of the week so that I can give you some number to go and work with.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, because then we can have those discussions. But yeah, it sounds wonderful. I mean, we've been having chats with better impact.
Yep.
I sent the requirements through and are to be processed, and I haven't heard back from them. We had kind of an initial chat with them last year, which I wasn't able to join for the same reason. I was late for this call, so do apologize from my end, but I'm trying to reschedule that. And then we've also been in touch with Assemble, And we have yet to reach out to Salesforce, although Salesforce will probably be the last resort, because we use Salesforce as our kind of existing CRM at the minute. There are, I'm assuming this is all API. This Volunteero is API driven. So if we needed to link it to Salesforce, our website is built using Wagtail, which is a Django framework.
Okay.
So that should be straightforward.
Yeah, that's easy. We've got clients that have hooked up their Salesforce instances. That is typically taken on by the client. So I don't know if you have a Salesforce person within the organization and stuff. Perfect. And then you just use Lightning flows and you can connect up to our API. It takes no time and it's pretty straightforward. And if there's anything lacking on our API that you find that you'd really find helpful, we roll out API changes very frequently, and that's again no cost on that one. We just want to make it as valuable as possible. No worries at all in terms of your website. All of the stuff that embeds onto the website is via HTML code anyway, so that will work with whatever provider you use. It's very straightforward to do. And no worries. We've got, we've gone up against, not so much better impact these days. It is the low cost provider, and it is essentially a database. The engagement with volunteers probably might not be that high. Assemble does have an app. I would just encourage on that one that you kind of have a look at the App Store reviews on them, just because that's all I will say, because since they got taken over by the Access Group, it typically you find that they do a cost-cutting exercise and sometimes bugging and things like that. But anyway, that's super. So I really appreciate, by the way, the transparency, because that is just I'm all about that as well. I want to be
definitely.
like, it just makes for a better relationship, right? Quite frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a really good platform. I've done a little bit of just research online myself, in terms of, what people are saying about Volunteero, and it has good reviews, more so than Assemble, surprisingly enough, and so that's great. But yeah, it'd be good to know the finances from your end, and because that obviously would be a deal breaker for us to just try and meet somewhere in the middle. But yeah, if you can find that out for us, that would be great. But it's good to know that the app is also included into the overall package as well, and branding.
And implementation as well, by the way. There's no additional cost for implementation or support. You get the highest level of support. You get the implementation support all the way throughout as well. And that's all just baked in.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, I don't know I have any further questions, but I'll let you know in terms of, so the process we're going through at the moment, as we're engaging with the other kind of platforms out there. The plan is we want to try and do like a soft launch by the end of Q4, which is end of April for us. So that's our financial year.
Right.
So we would like to try and implement if not all of those must-haves by the end of April.
Okay.
Now, our legal team require about 6 to 7 weeks of contract kind of approval and review. So I was going to ask as well, to get to get that process going, could you send me your legal kind of documents that you send to your clients so that we can review that ahead and kind of get the ball rolling with our legal team, just to kind of get us in good stead so that we can kick off. We'd like to try and kick off towards the end of Feb to implement it by implementation towards the end of April, with a soft launch essentially, and then the hard launch would kind of flow after. So yeah, it would be good to kind of get an idea from you in terms of what that would look like.
Sure. That's absolutely fine. I will send through some additional resources. I'll send through once I've got some kind of approval on a more, a better commercial like pricing proposal. I'll send through our kind of legal docs with some other stuff that might be helpful around our security. They can review that and things like that. And in terms of kind of those dates that you're talking about there, no trouble at all, honestly. So, we always have capacity in our team to set up those kickoff calls and those kind of implementation calls. So that won't be a challenge. In terms of be it speed to market, we are the best in that by hands down because of the lack of need for dev input and things like that. So your dates are fine. No, nothing that worries me there.
Good. All right. Sounds great.
All
Thank you.
right, fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much for your time, guys. It really was a pleasure. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
brilliant.
you.
Have a
Have a
wonderful
soon.
day.
Have a good afternoon. Bye.
You too. Bye.